Welcome to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Bookshelf, a space for women healing from betrayal to reconnect with their mind, body, and soul, one page at a time. I'm Rachel Strong-Smith, a betrayal trauma coach who's walked this path myself. In each episode, we'll explore books that speak to the heart of recovery, books that validate your experience, offer insight, and remind you that you're not alone. This isn't about fixing yourself. It's about coming home to yourself. So, whether you're in the thick of survival or finding your way back to solid ground, pull up a chair. You're in the right place. Hi there. Welcome back to the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Bookshelf. We are continuing the interview with gaslighting expert Sarah Morales as we discuss her workbook, Take Your Power Back. Thanks for tuning in, and let's just jump right in. Okay.
All right.
Well, I'm going to skip around a little bit, but let's talk a little bit about self-gaslighting. So that inner voice that comes in and invalidates and second guesses. How does your framework help someone start to recognize, interrupt that internal? Because after the external gaslighting, I mean, my gaslighter didn't have to do it anymore.
Absolutely.
I just took it on.
Yeah. Absolutely. Because that's part of the brainwashing part, right? I think the best way that I've ever explained what happens through self-gaslighting is you stop seeing yourself through your own eyes and you start seeing yourself through the eyes of your gaslighter. So how my framework helps is once we start identifying, I used to tell myself I'm too emotional or whatever, right? When I start seeing that actually came from my basketball coach in high school, it became my own voice. I would tell myself that as a survival strategy, right? Because we're wired to believe that if we don't have attachment and connection, we're going to die. So if there are things that are perceived threats to those attachments, then I'm going to go into survival or coping mechanisms, right? So a lot of those are those self-gaslighting messages. They start because of a perceived threat to an attachment. When your gaslighter tells you you're behaving in a way that they don't like, and it's a gaslighting message, right? We hear that and we're like, oh crap, I got to be not so intense. I got to be not so emotional because I need this attachment. This is happening at the subconscious level. So once we start putting these things into patterns, we start seeing these messages. Oh no, these messages are a part of a gaslighting system. So what does that mean for me? That means that's not my authentic voice. So then we can go back and get curious. I'll never forget one client who she came to me because of intimate partner gaslighting, like most of my clients do. But as she started getting to this place, this lesson, what is it, 8? No, I guess it's 10 now. When you start actually putting things into the flow chart, you can see the evolution. It used to be lesson 8. When she started putting things into the flow chart, she started seeing that the same messages that had been showing up in her intimate partnership had been showing up since she was a kid in her family of origin, and specifically with an uncle. And that's why she didn't realize it, because she had internalized those messages. And so when she heard them in her intimate partnership, they didn't raise a red flag like they normally would have if she hadn't have heard them all her life. Right. So you start being able to identify, oh, that's not my voice, right? Those messages of I'm too much or I'm not enough or and it can be anything, right? I remember one that I broke was people will love me as long as I live up to their expectations of me. And a lot of people in my life who had a lot of high expectations for me, different careers I should pursue. And that's what I told myself. So I fell in line. It's not about betrayal, except for self-betrayal, right? But so those, to me, I jokingly likened the self-gaslighting part to like, I hear low key the like theme music to Star Trek, like when they're like the next, out there and beyond, next level. For me, that is like where I see the most transformation is when we're no longer worrying about who out there is gaslighting us, but we're looking at where do I gaslight myself via making concessions, via internal bargaining. And these are things I do go into in some level in the workbook. I do at some point want to do a little mini course that's just on self-gaslighting because I'd like to go into it quite a bit deeper. But I think there's enough in the workbook for you to begin to see, oh, that again, that thing that's not my voice. And I don't want to agree with that anymore. I don't want to let these other people define me. That was a moment for me. It's actually one of my t-shirts is I don't let other people define me. I define me.
I want that shirt too.
I know, right? It's really
Oh,
sassy. It's fun.
oh, I love that. Oh, and I'm very excited to see the upcoming project and see what that comes out of that, because you're right. I think it does need its own space to just really dive in. And
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, the workbook, the course offers that foundation, and then
Mm-hmm.
to really go deeper, maybe have a little bit more to go into.
Yep.
Absolutely.
My hope someday, like my dream, I'm not short on dreams. My coach once told me, she's like, Sarah, you need to pick just one or two. Get those going, get your main highway going, and then you can get all these little offshoots. And I was like, okay, because I'm like trying to do 10 things at once. But one of the things I'd really love to do is an experience that will probably have some things to do, like of a culmination of like self-gaslighting, boundaries, and values, and do a thing where we have a group experience and then like have like a retreat where we like do some really cool stuff around those three things, and then aftercare 3 month. Like that's one of my dreams. Someday I'm going to do it. No promises on this podcast of when it will happen, but it's a dream.
But you heard it here first.
You heard it
folks.
here. You heard it here first for publicly, at least. I've expressed it otherwise, but
yes.
first publicly. Yeah. It's important.
I love that. Yes.
That's where I found the most freedom. And
Yes.
the most like the word that freedom doesn't really capture it for me. It's like liberation. To me, that's an even bigger word, because I feel like no, not freedom, but liberation it's a word that describes when you've been captive and now you're no longer captive. That to me is what liberation is. And that's how I feel. Like, honestly, I felt like I lived so much of my life captive to things that were not authentically me, that had come from so many different areas in my life. And we do go into that part in the course in the workbook as well. We look at the different areas and the different places we might have experienced gaslighting. And so we kind of open that door to where else might I have heard messages that have taken me out of being my most authentic self.
Yes. Oh, I love that word that you say, liberation. That really resonates with me as well. I loved how you were talking about when that shift was coming as, wait, I'm not the thing that they've been saying. Oh, I remember the first time I said it. And I was like,
what was it? Do you remember what it was about?
I'm not mean. I'm not cruel. Wow, I really thought that when I expressed my emotions, and I did just express, like I went back and like redid it. I never called names. I never shouted insults. I didn't. I know I didn't. But he acted as if I did. And as I looked back and I was like, no, I never did. I said, I am angry. I am frustrated. I am hurt. I am devastated. And I had passion about that, but I never was cruel, and I never was degrading, and I never was insulting. And it was like, that. Whoa. And so you need that.
Good for you. One of the most powerful ones I had of that was like, wait a second, I'm really funny. It was actually on the opposite side, right? Because gaslighting isn't always about making you think bad things about yourself overtly. Sometimes it's a kind of more of that undermining effect that gaslighting can have, where if someone is actively trying to break you a little bit, they're going to try to make you feel, especially in places that you might be strong, they're going to try to make you feel less intelligent, less. I mean, for my case, it was funny because laughter and humor is like, it's a big part of a thing that I love about myself. So for that to be broken in me and for me to stop believing that about myself was big. I lost a big part of myself when I stopped allowing myself to just be funny. And I remember I was just driving and I was like, wait a second, I'm effing hilarious. It was like this, wait, right? I wasn't even saying it to anybody else. It was a moment of me reclaiming a part of me that I had lost.
Yes. Okay. I have so many places I want to go, because I'm like, okay, we've got our R's, we've got our flow chart, we've got our distinct phases. Where do you think we should go next?
I mean, I really liked the question. It's just, I have it labeled as number 5.
Acceptable. Let's go there. So there's a section about why people are susceptible to gaslighting. Emotional patterns, vulnerabilities make it easier to lose sight of ourselves. So what are some of those patterns, and how can awareness help to shift things?
So first of all, I want to explain this. I do this in the workbook and in the course, but I want to say it here, because if people don't hear this part, they're going to mishear everything else. This is not about victim blaming. As a survivor of this type of abuse, I would never blame victims. You're not at fault. In fact, a lot of the things that we look at that are vulnerabilities, they're things that are beautiful about us. And they're not safe when you're engaging with somebody that is gaslighting you. So we have to learn how to protect them. So that's the energy that we approach this with. Not blame, like you're at fault, you need to fix this about you. It's about recognizing when you're safe to be your complete vulnerable self and when you're not and you have to protect yourself. So that's what I mean. And that's the heart behind that.
I want to jump in and second that as a witness, because yes, and I think you do a really good job of explaining
Thank
that.
you.
Because of the gaslighting, it is really easy to feel like, oh, it's my fault. If I had just blah, 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 then he wouldn't have blah, blah, blah. Right. And
We do that anyways. Yeah.
We're already doing that. So thank you for
Mm-hmm.
emphasizing that again and again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So really what I wrote down here, I didn't give an exact scenario. I just kind of wanted to outline how that part of the flow chart works. So then we can talk about why it's important. So let's just imagine for a second that you might have grown up in a family that had unclear boundaries in the family. So that's what we would call a thing that makes us susceptible. So when that susceptibility is basically pressed on, button that's pushed, right? We might go into any one of our vulnerabilities. So in this case, what I chose was going back on your boundaries. So you maybe try to state a boundary, but because you had unclear boundaries in your family of origin, you doubt the validity of your own boundaries. So you go back on them. That's a vulnerability that you might have. If you have that vulnerability, you might fall into the gaslighting traps that I have named as the empathy trap, combined with the negotiation trap, which I always like to tell people the negotiating that you're doing is not with the other person. It's the negotiating that you're doing with yourself, which is basically making concessions. So why is this important? If I can identify the different paths, right? Because what we're going to talk about here is usually gaslighters, especially ones that are, for lack of better terminology, really good at it. They will use a lot of different tactics, a lot of different techniques. And so then it will hit you in different ways. So for example, if a gaslighter is using a love bombing technique, that might hit a susceptibility of feeling, some kind of childhood wound in your family of origin, not the going back on your boundaries. That's not going to hit your boundary one. That's going to hit a different susceptibility. So we work at kind of learning which of our susceptibilities make us at risk, and then we do a flow chart from there. Well, I should back up and say you're likely going to often connect with most of them, but there's going to be 3, maybe 4, that these are the ones that have the most, I feel like a gut kick when I read that one because it resonates so deeply. So those are the ones that you focus on. You're not trying to do every single one in the entire world that you've ever experienced. That would be completely overwhelming and you'd shut down. So just pick a couple. So I can see how when that is activated, I go into people pleasing. That's another vulnerability, right? Because I'm afraid of that attachment wound. When we reverse engineer this, why this is important is because this is where we can start making interventions. If I have any, wellness professionals that are listening, in addition, I don't know who your majority of your crowd is, but this is the part where I get really excited because this is where we can teach our clients to change the pattern, right? So we start by maybe looking at the vulnerabilities, right? So if you have unclear boundaries, well, let's talk about what boundaries actually are. Let's put an intervention on actually helping you understand what they are, what their function, et cetera, right? And then you can maybe come up with them with a single mantra to help them combat the negative self-talk that they might have around that. Like having clear boundaries is the most loving thing I can do for myself and everyone I'm in a relationship with. There's a mantra to combat that, right? So let's say that you're not quick enough to address that and you've already gone into your vulnerability, right? Which happens because the family of origin stuff is the deepest, hardest stuff to get to. So, now that you missed that, I'm kind of thinking of I'm a big loader nerd. For those of you who don't know what loader is, it's Lord of the Rings. So I'm picturing castles that have the outer wall. And if the enemy gets through that wall, then you have the next wall. And if they breach that wall, you've got one final place, and you like really hope that you can hold out until help comes so that you're safe within that last component, right? So it's kind of like that idea, right? Where you're hoping you can catch it with the susceptibilities. But if you don't, if you know that you have a tendency to go back on your boundary, maybe you can catch yourself when you're going back on a boundary, and you can say something like, for me, one of my mantras is, I don't beg to be loved well, because I lived that way for a long time, and I no longer do that. And one of the ways I did that was by going back on my boundaries. I let people break boundaries thing, right? So no, I love myself. I don't beg to be loved well. So when we can recognize those things, we can introduce intervention. So hopefully we stop it there. And if we don't stop it there, so do you see what I'm saying? You can introduce interventions in each of those three categories so that hopefully the wall right, the gate stands and doesn't get broken, and the enemies aren't able to come in. Worst case scenario, you get sucked into the trap, and then you realize it later when you're talking in group, or you're talking to your therapist, your coach, and then it's worst case scenario, it still isn't that bad. So that to me is the beauty, and why I geek out and get so excited when people get to that side. I know a lot of people are really excited about learning about the gaslighter, but the real magic, the real power is when we get to that side of the flowchart.
Yes, because that is where we actually have our power. That's where we can actually do something.
Yep.
And let's just briefly overview that flow chart, because we've referenced it. And tell me a little bit about that. How does it help to see those cycles or get the fog lifted?
So basically, each lesson in the course or the workbook is one bubble, if you will, in the flow chart. And so as you're learning how to identify these different things, you can learn how to plug and play, basically, right? So a client that I referenced about the she literally used poster board size to do her flow charts. I have them printed up in the workbook, and I have PDFs for those that do online, but she got out because she had so many that she was identifying that she wanted to be able to track them a little bit better. But so you basically would take it. So again, like how I said earlier, the tactics, it would be two bubbles, and which, right? It's not which one, it's how many. When you typically will start with a situation. So this is just what happened with my partner when we were trying to talk about his therapy last night or whatever. I think it was gaslighting. Let me take out this flow chart. This is how I use it. Let me take out this flow chart and see if I can plug and play what just happened. So when he said, you're just insecure, like I said before, and then you pull out your stuff and you can put it into the flow chart. So he used these tactics that went into this technique. And it's not, the thing I love about my flow chart and why I think what I'm doing is so important, it doesn't matter his level of awareness. It doesn't matter why he tried to do it. We're just looking at trying to identify behaviors, right? Yeah. The why does matter, but it's not, that's subjective. And so when we try to worry about the why or the level of awareness, we open the door for self-doubt. When all we're doing is trying to look at behaviors, it can be more objective. It's not going to be perfect, but the level of self-doubt decreases dramatically. So all you're doing is trying to identify behaviors. There was a half-truth here. There was an exaggeration here. Those things flow objectively into these techniques flow pretty objectively. There's some subjectivity because it's how you experience those techniques flow into this method, right? Then you go, okay, so that's what happened. Now let's go look at my side. What was happening in me, right? Because again, then the next time that happens, because it's likely going to happen again, even if they're getting better, they don't go from being a gaslighter to not a gaslighter overnight. It usually is a process. It can be done. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written a course for that as well. But it takes a long time. So you got to learn how to protect yourself in the meantime. It's going to happen again, right? So this time I don't want to lose myself. This time I don't want to doubt the validity of what I saw happening, right? I don't want to end up in confusion. So what happened to me? Put it into the flow chart. Where can I put in interventions?
That is perfect. Honestly, I could talk for hours about
right?
this. I really could. I just
Me too.
am eating this up and I love it. And we're
Good.
at time
Right?
already. I know. So I may have to have you on again, especially when your mini course comes out.
Sure. Hey, have me back. I would love to.
Oh, I love it.
Mhm.
Well, let's just kind of end with a couple of questions for someone who is just realizing that they've been gaslit. Maybe something really is like, oh, and they're
Mhm.
feeling lost. What is one
Mhm.
message from your Take Your Power Back that you'd want them to hear today?
I think the first thing I would say is it's not always going to be like this. I would say give yourself permission to put your safety first.
Mm.
Give yourself permission to not have to be right in order to protect yourself. I think that's a big one, right? You don't have to have all of the information to know that you don't like what's happening, that you don't feel safe, etc. I think those are some of the things that I would say. I would say get yourself in a group if you can. Community. I've had so many clients say that if I hadn't had my community, I would have gone back because it's really hard to do this work when you're the only voice that is speaking truth, when you don't have someone to mirror back to you the truth and how spot on you are. Honestly, so much of my one-on-one sessions are me validating people, reassuring them that what you just said there to your husband, I literally had this morning in a client session. You said everything so perfectly. This is not about you. You know what you need. You know what is healthy, right? Just because he's not responding in a healthy way doesn't mean you'd, right? So there's so much of that. So I would say group work that's led by a trained. I know there are some places out there that just let people meet without even a peer trained
Yeah.
facilitator. Minimum, someone who has been trained to be a peer facilitator. There are programs out there that train peer facilitators.
Hmm.
Make sure, please, for the love of all that is good, I know you want to be in a group or you want connection and all of these things. Please make sure they're trained. Otherwise, there's so many horror stories about the re-traumatization that happens, the gaslighting that happens from other people in the groups, especially
Hmm.
if they're mixed. If they're like
Yeah.
co-ed groups, like couples groups. Anyway, so I rambled there a little bit, but I think those are the top things I would say. Give yourself permission. It's going to be okay. I promise. Get yourself in a group and then the psychoeducation. The
Yes.
psychoeducation is whether it's my stuff or somebody else's. There are a few other books out there now. There weren't really when I started, but there are quite a few now. You want somebody else's, great. Just get some psychoeducation if it's not mine.
Oh, I love that. Thank you.
Mhm.
And where can listeners find your workbook, learn more about your Deconstructing
Mhm.
Gaslighting Academy program?
Yeah. So I try to make it easy. Sometimes I can give a little bit too much information. So I try to make it easy on my website. All things can be found on my website. The two places that are easiest to find things right on my homepage, you're going to see the option for either the workbook or the course. First thing you see on the homepage. Outside of that, you can go to the tab that says Academy. And that's where you're going to find the different programs that I have that are actually ready to be consumed or, or used. I think there's 3 out of like the 6 that I want to have. And then outside of that, under the resources, you're going to find my podcast, you're going to find my store, you're going to find my free webinar. I have like a 30, 40-minute webinar on how to have conversations with your gaslighter. And that one's just for free. And then all of that is on my my website, which is Sarah with an H, sarahmoralescoaching.com. Similarly, it's the same website. I also have the deconstructinggaslighting.com. So both of them work.
They're both on there.
It's the
Wonderful.
same one. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That'll be
Mhm.
a great resource. And I have just loved our
Me
conversation.
too.
Oh, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. They've been amazing questions. They're really fun. Thank you for
We
having
didn't
me on.
even get through all of them.
I didn't think we would. I was like, she's going to have
I
to have me
know.
back. She's going to have a
I
part
think
2.
I think we will. We're
Yeah.
gonna have to make that happen.
Thank you, Rachel, so
Oh,
much for having me on today.
thank you. Thank
All right.
you. And thank you to our listeners for being here. And as always, take what resonates and leave the rest. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining me today on the Betrayal Trauma Recovery Bookshelf. If something from this episode spoke to you, share it with a friend or come connect with me online. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Rachel Strong Smith. And if you want to go deeper, sign up for my email newsletter, where I share grounded support, personal insights, and practical tools to help you reconnect with yourself. Remember, healing isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. and every step towards yourself matters. So, until next time, take gentle care.